Bobby, B-O-B-B-Y?
Nope, it's B-O-B-B-I-E.
Sorry? B-O-B-B-I-E?
I-E, yeah.
Can you just say your name on camera, please?
Yes. I will do that. It's like-
Okay, we're ready.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Bobby Ann Cox. I am a constitutional law attorney, and I am the director of Stop NY Corruption. I'm here today with current and past members of Congress, as well as some local leaders and elected officials. Stop New York Corruption is a statewide organization, and we represent civic-minded New Yorkers who are dedicated to educating the public about the corrupt act of gerrymandering. We are trying to preserve competitive elections, we are trying to preserve civil rights in New York State, and we are trying to promote democracy. This is not about Republican or Democrat. This is not about left or right. Stop NY Corruption is a nonpartisan organization, and I'm here today with members of both the Republican and Democrat parties. In fact, I myself am a Democrat. But that doesn't matter, because this is about the Constitution, and this is about the will of the people of New York State. The political elites in Albany want to ignore our Constitution for their own political gain, and this is completely unacceptable. The Constitution was written to keep the politicians in check. It was not written to keep the people in check. Your vote is the most powerful tool that you have as a New Yorker. And the right to vote, suffrage, is listed second in our New York State Constitution, only to the Bill of Rights. The corrupt politicians in Albany want to manipulate your vote. They're trying to use the courts in order to advance their own political gain. And this is a power grab of the most shameful kind. These corrupt elites have filed a lawsuit to try to redraw the congressional maps again. This is a violation of our New York State Constitution, because we just had the maps redrawn last year in accordance with the 2020 census. Those maps are now supposed to stay in place until the next census in 2030. That is what our Constitution says, and that is the will of the people. Our Constitution outlaws gerrymandering, because gerrymandering is the manipulation of people's votes. Furthermore, a recent poll of New York State voters found an overwhelming 81% of New Yorkers believe that gerrymandering is a form of cheating. An alarming 76% of voters believe that gerrymandering denies them their civil right to choose their member of Congress in competitive elections. A striking 78% of voters believe that gerrymandering leads to more corruption. And 72% of voters think that gerrymandering allows political bosses to pick the members of Congress instead of New Yorkers. This lawsuit is now in front of the state's highest court, the Court of Appeals. And even the League of Women Voters here in New York has filed an amicus brief. They believe that the will of the people, the Constitution of New York State, should be followed, as do we. I do believe that the Court of Appeals will uphold the Constitution and will not require the maps to be redrawn. However, we must remain vigilant. Protect your vote. It is the most sacred thing. It is the most powerful thing you have as a New Yorker. Please join the effort. Please go to our website, which is stopnycorruption.com. And there you can sign our petition, you can sign up for our weekly emails, and you can stay informed. Go on our website, sign the petition, follow us on social media, share our information. We must all be involved. Here today with me, I have like-minded, concerned citizens and members of Congress, as well as members of the New York City Council. We are going to hear from each of them now on this crucial topic. I would first like to introduce former Congressman Lee Zeldin to please come up and say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby Ann, and grateful for your leadership in bringing us together. A lot of New Yorkers may not even realize that on November 15th last month, up in Buffalo, the Court of Appeals heard this case. I was serving the state legislature about a decade ago with then Assemblywoman Malliotakis and a state legislative background here of both of our congressional representatives who are with us. They'll understand well this history that didn't just start in the last few weeks or months. See, a decade ago, New Yorkers of all walks of life, Republicans and Democrats and independents, called on the state legislature to pass a constitutional amendment that would get rid of hyperpartisan gerrymandering. And it came to the people after it passed the legislature, 2 consecutive legislatures. The people of New York, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, amended New York State's constitution to get rid of hyperpartisan gerrymandering from the legislature. That is what Bobby Ann's talking about, which says will of the people on a statewide ballot. New Yorkers have already voted. Well, the state legislature then, many years later, decides that they want to amend the Constitution again. This time they want to take back their powers. And the legislature puts their amendment to a statewide ballot. And once again, Republicans and Democrats and independents all across the state of New York said no. We already weighed in on this. We amended the Constitution. We do not want hyper-partisan gerrymandering, New Yorkers said. And they did not want the state legislature to change that and take back this power. So the powers that be up in Albany attempted another bite at the apple. And a case came before the Court of Appeals last year. And the Court of Appeals made a ruling saying that the will of the people is clear. They ruled on the merits. The Constitution of the state of New York is clear. And instead of allowing hyperpartisan gerrymandering by the state legislature, instead we ended up with new fair lines. New York's fair lines resulted in some of the most competitive congressional elections in the whole country. Many of them, all across this state. We have a balance of representation. We have Republicans and Democrats throughout this state who know who their constituents are, and their constituents know who their members of Congress are. And now we are in the middle of a decade. We can't just allow an abuse of the institution of the Court of Appeals. We can't allow this attack on the will of the people to go forward. And we can't ignore what the Constitution of the state of New York actually says. So I'm grateful for these elected officials for being here and for the media to be here. Most importantly, because there are New Yorkers who don't even realize that the Court of Appeals even heard this case just a few weeks ago. And I believe the Court of Appeals should rule on the merits, that they should respect the will of New Yorkers. The Court of Appeals should not allow their institution to be abused and eroded. They should rule on the merits. They should defend the Constitution, and they should keep the current maps that are in place. Bobby Ann, thank you again, and I look forward to continuing to see your great efforts with Stop NY Corruption.
Thank you so much, former Congressman Lee Zeldin there. I'd like to now introduce current Congressman Mike Lawler, who is representing New York 17, and I would like him to say a few words about this important topic.
Thank you, Bobby Ann. Thank you, Congressman Zeldin, and to my colleagues in government for being here. As Congressman Zeldin pointed out, the voters of New York State, the voters, weighed in on this a decade ago. And they said they did not want gerrymandering. They wanted fair, honest maps, and for the people to choose who their representatives are. Not the politicians, not the political parties. In 2021, Democrats with complete control in Washington, Albany, and New York City tried to jam through a constitutional amendment. The voters rejected it overwhelmingly. And so what did Democrats in Albany do with the support of their counterparts in Washington? They tried to gerrymander New York's maps and break the Independent Redistricting Commission. They created gridlock intentionally, failing to pass a second map, with the hope that the legislature would be able to exert its will on the people of the state of New York and gerrymander the maps down to 22 Democrats and 4 Republicans. And in fact, Sean Patrick Maloney, who I defeated last year, sent a memo to state Democrats laying out exactly how they should draw the maps. Mike Generis, all too compliant. It was pathetic, and it was a disgrace. And the Democrat-appointed Court of Appeals made very clear that they not only gerrymandered the maps, but they violated the state constitution. And in appointing a special master, they gave us a fair set of maps. Now, fair meaning competitive. Joe Biden won my district by 10 points. There's 70,000 more Democrats than Republicans. That doesn't favor me, but I could compete in it. Why? Because Democrats' complete control in Washington, Albany, and New York City created an absolute mess. Record inflation, skyrocketing crime, skyrocketing energy prices. Voters in New York wanted balance and common sense. And so they elected 11 Republicans and 15 Democrats because they wanted a more balanced approach to governing. That's a good thing for America. It's a good thing for New York. But Democrats weren't content with the people deciding. No, they filed another lawsuit at the behest of Hakeem Jeffries, who wants to be Speaker of the House. Now, this lawsuit seeks to invalidate the prior ruling and demand a new set of maps be drawn by the IRC so that the legislature can have a second bite at the apple, despite the legislature violating the process as outlined in the state constitution. The ruling last year was very clear. The legislature violated the Constitution, it gerrymandered the maps, and it broke the process. And the only remedy was a court-appointed special master. The court-appointed special master gave a fair set of maps. But that's not good enough for state and national Democrats. They now want the courts to intervene once again and give them a second bite at the apple, so that they can gerrymander the maps. Despite the Constitution saying very clearly that you cannot have mid-decade redistricting. Despite the Constitution saying very clearly that you cannot favor or disfavor any political party or elected official. Yet that's what they want to do. So hell-bent on taking complete control. It's disgusting. It's unbecoming, and they should be ashamed. But they took it a step further. When Governor Hochul tried to appoint a judge to the Court of Appeals last year, state Democrats blocked it to get a more favorable judge, one they thought would rule in their favor on this case specifically. The Court of Appeals heard the case a little less than a month ago. We expect a ruling any day now. If the court wants to uphold the integrity of its institution, it will reject this outright. Not just because the state constitution is clear, but because the Democrats missed the filing period to bring this second lawsuit. The court will have to twist itself into knots to come up with a favorable ruling for state and national Democrats. But the only people that will be hurt are the people of the state of New York, because they have been clear that they have been clear that they want balance and common sense restored to every level of government. They have been clear that they want fair maps. So that is what this is about. And we are hopeful that the court will do the right thing, will reject the cynical and heavy-handed approach of Governor Hochul, Leader Jeffries, Mike Gianaris, Carl Hastie, and all the party bosses in Albany, and put the people of the state of New York first. They deserve nothing less. They deserve fair maps, and they deserve these maps to continue in place through the next census in 2030. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, Congressman Lawler. Next, we're going to hear from Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis.
Thank you very much for coming today. You may recall when redistricting took place, I know we had some conversations earlier about this, my district was the one that made this entire map unconstitutional. The fact that they tried to politically gerrymander Jerry Nadler from the Upper West Side of Manhattan in a little snake district to southern Brooklyn to take out conservative parts of my district and then try to move me into Park Slope, Brooklyn. It was what made this map purely politically gerrymandered and unconstitutional. So the remedy, of course, was for an independent master that was court appointed to draw these maps, and it was the appropriate remedy. You couldn't get any more fair maps than ones that were independently drawn by a court-ordered special master. But yet here we are again because Democrats are blatantly attempting to redraw the lines, to tilt the scale, to give their Democratic candidates an advantage in the 2024 elections. Voters rejected political gerrymandering, as was mentioned, not once, twice, and last in 2021, when they said they did not want the state legislature, the partisan-controlled state legislature, to be able to draw these district lines. They did not want political gerrymandering. But Kathy Hochul and the Democrats in Albany don't give a damn what the voters think. They're trying to take back the power regardless of what the voters said in a referendum, and they're attempting to redraw the lines once again. It is so corrupt. It is such a slap in the face to the voters of New York, and they're doing this because they cannot win on policy, they cannot win on debate, and they cannot win on merit. And so the only thing that they can do, because they have all the power in the state, is try to redraw the lines to tilt the scale to give their candidates an advantage in an election. It is wrong. And it's not an attack on me or Mike Lawler or any of the other Republican members of Congress. It's an attack on the people that we represent, who duly elected us to be their voice in Washington. I'm the only person in this city that gives our city bipartisan representation in Washington. And that is important. People do want to see a balance in their representation because they've seen how radical and ridiculous New York has gotten under one-party rule. And they see how extreme things went when Democrats controlled the entire federal government as well. And so we say that we hope that this court will reject this, quite frankly, because as was mentioned, no statute of limitations has expired. Law clearly says no redrawing of maps mid-decade. This was the most fair process and outcome anyone could have asked for, with a special independent master drawing these lines. And quite frankly, it's interesting, isn't it, that they sued just for the House seats, not the state Senate seats, that were drawn by the same method. Maybe it's perhaps because they took control of the state Senate. This is not just about defeating Republicans here in New York. It's about taking control of the House of Representatives. So the implications are huge, just not for our constituents, for the entire state of New York, and quite frankly, for the balance of the entire nation. Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate you being here and covering this important topic.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next, we're going to hear from Joe Borelli, who's New York City Councilman, Minority Leader.
Thank you so much. Thank you. For over 100 years, for more than a century, the word progressive in this state has stood for the people that took the power away from the party bosses and gave it back to the public. And now, 100 years after the legalization of primaries, the formation of the civil service, the elimination of patronage, now progressive Democrats are actually trying to give the power back to the party bosses in Albany. They're trying to put the smoke back in the smoke-filled rooms. This should upset every single New Yorker. This is telling the New Yorkers out there from Putnam County to Staten Island to Erie County, John and Jane voter, they're saying, we don't care about your opinion. We don't care the way you voted in a referendum. We don't care that you want to support your candidate by standing outside of a train station, handing out flyers, doing elections the normal way. They'd rather win the majority in the House of Representatives in a courtroom in Erie County than in the streets of Kinderhook and Poughkeepsie and Putnam and all the other places where our current district lines give us competitive, open elections. You don't like Mike Lawler? Knock on some doors. You don't like Nicole Malliotakis? Knock on some doors. But this should upset every single registered voter in the state of New York who believes in the rule of law, believes in our state constitution, and believes that we have done a good job in reducing the power of political bosses and political patronage in this state, and doesn't want to do a 180-degree turn back the opposite direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Now we're going to hear from City Councilman Bob Holden.
As a lifelong Democrat, 50 years, I've been fed up with the whole system in New York State. And certainly we rank as one of the worst politically corrupt states in the Union. And there's a reason for that. Gerrymandering has been done in my district for decades. As a Democrat, a conservative Democrat, I am fed up with politics as usual in New York State. And certainly something has to be done. If anybody thinks that New York State has the greatest leadership, especially from the Democrats, and here's a Democrat saying that, look around. Look around at what we have. Look around at our criminal justice system. Look around at our streets, the lawlessness you see. It's my district, again, is conservative. That's how I won. I beat a Democrat, and I also ran on the Republican line. How many elected officials have done that? It's not about politics. It's about doing the right thing. Now you're seeing the Democrats, again, the clubhouse Democrats, acting up and saying, we're going to change it. We want the whole ball of wax. I want a two-party system. Who doesn't? Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want competitive elections? I want that. I want to bring back some conservative Democrats to the city and to the state. The only way to do that is break up the clubhouse. And the clubhouse is alive and well in New York State, and the governor is leading the way for that. She's got to wake up. The voters, how many voters are coming out in our elections, folks? Not many, 20% if we're lucky. So that's a disgusting figure. So let's wake up, let's stop this attempt. The voters have spoken. Again, let's do the right thing, and let's think about the people for a change in New York State. Thank you.
Again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today. I'd like to thank all of these elected officials for taking the time. We're happy to take some questions if you have any questions for us.
So it seems on the arguments that went on in the Court of Appeals and the comments made by some of the Democrats that the court is hell-bent on ordering new elections. Is there anything else that you can do to stop it if they in fact do order redrawing of the lines?
Well, if there's going to be a redrawing of the lines, depending on how this case turns in the Court of Appeals, then what's going to happen is it's going to go back to the same process that we went through last time. The issue is that the Independent Redistricting Commission last time was deadlocked. So the commission has 10 members, 5 are Democrats, 5 are Republicans, and they couldn't come to a common map. They couldn't agree on a common map. So what the Constitution says is that they're supposed to have 2 drawings of the map. They only had 1. They deadlocked. They said we're not going to be able to produce any maps, and then the legislature illegally stepped in. It is super majority controlled Democrat. They stepped in. They weren't supposed to. They drew the maps. They weren't supposed to, and then they were sued. And as a result of that lawsuit, we had the special master appointed last year who drew the maps. So now,
here's my question. So the time for this is drawn short. Petitions are February 12th, as I understand. So if the court orders a redrawing of the lines that happen quickly, and then once you see them, you have to then sue to say they're not fair. Is there time to do this, or does this throw the whole election process for November 2024 into chaos?
yes, it absolutely does. Excellent question. The time is very short, and that's part of the problem. That's why we can't be playing games like this. We should be following the Constitution instead of, doing what we want and trying to do an unconstitutional illegal power grab. So it absolutely will affect, you're right, petitions start in February. It absolutely will affect the process because if a lawsuit has to be brought and we have to go through the courts all over again, like we saw last year, there was a bit of chaos with people not knowing where their districts were going to be, voters not knowing who their representatives were going to be. So it's going to turn into the same problem of we are short on time. There's going to be a lawsuit if we end up with gerrymandered, illegal, unconstitutional maps again, and it's going to cause a problem absolutely in the election process.
So are you saying that if these are lines that you can't live with, that you will file suit?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Will you file suit if the new lines that are drawn, if they're drawn, are gerrymandered? Will you file suit to stop it?
I am sure that is something that will take place. That is not. The people of New York cannot stand by and watch unconstitutional gerrymandering happen. So if they are going to do the same thing that we just went through last year, I do see a lawsuit in that future. I don't know if Congressman Zeldin would like to say something about what happened the first go around with the last minute maps and the lawsuit last year.
There absolutely would be chaos in our elections if the Court of Appeals blew up these fair lines right now. Will there be hearings all throughout the entire state to allow New Yorkers to be able to show up and have their voices heard? Once you give the public comments, it's important for government to hear those public comments and to respond to them. And as you just pointed out, there are petitions that are supposed to come out in the coming weeks. It is a certainty that there will be mistakes made in this very rushed process that would result in litigation. Again, on the merits, this is all crystal clear how this should play out. On the merits, the people who were arguing for the court to blow up the maps on November 15th, they weren't even arguing against the current maps. They weren't even complaining about the maps that are in place. They want to blow those up, even though they have no problem with those maps. The rush is going to create a problem. We had Nicole Malliotakis just here talking about her district. I mean, you take some of these city council seats, and these city councilmen are the experts on it, but if you want to go into Queens and create a congressional district that ends up cutting up an Asian community in Flushing, or an Asian community in Brooklyn and Sunset Park, what happens if you start cutting up a Jewish community between Borough Park and Williamsburg and Crown Heights? In a rushed process, they may end up creating a map that is even more flawed than the first time they came up with maps. So to your question, whether or not I would anticipate, any of us would anticipate litigation, I think it's a certainty. And I also believe it's a certainty that on the merits, that there's no way that they're going to be able to get this right in time for petitions to start in February. A 0% chance that if the court blows up these maps, that this is resolved correctly, constitutionally, in time for February's petitions.
I would just add, there's a very simple way for there not to be chaos next year. And it would be for the court to reject this cynical attempt by Democrats to seize complete control in Albany, Washington, and New York City. There is 0% chance if the court rules against the voters of New York State and orders a new set of maps, that there will not be lawsuits. Not just from electeds and others. There would be lawsuits from the public, because as Congressman Zeldin just pointed out, that communities of interest are going to be broken up by this cynical attempt by Democrats to gerrymander the maps. It's exactly what happened last year, when they tried to gerrymander the maps to produce 22 Democrats and 4 Republicans in a state where Lee Zeldin, got over 47% of the vote. So this is really unfortunate that Governor Hochul, who submitted an amicus brief, and if anybody asked her a question, what exactly is her rationale for submitting an amicus brief? And by the way, why did the judge she appointed recuse herself? Nobody's gotten a straight answer on that. She appointed a judge to serve on the Court of Appeals, and one of her first actions is to recuse herself on this case. If that doesn't stink of corruption, I don't know what does. Governor Hochul should be embarrassed by her conduct here. And ultimately, this is about doing right by the people of the state of New York, upholding the rule of law. Democrats talk a lot about the need to protect our democracy. They are doing everything they can to trample on it with this lawsuit.
Do you have any other questions?
Thanks so much.
Thank you all for coming.